Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something huge, a cultural force that's completely changing the game when it comes to beauty, reality, and maybe even what it means to be human.
So let's just jump right in with a big question, one that really gets to the core of this whole thing. What happens when perfect isn't something you're born with or work for anymore? What if it's just a product you can buy?
Well, that's where this idea of the synthetic beauty standard comes in. And look, this is not your mother's beauty standard. We're talking about a super narrow, flawless look that's cooked up by algorithms and, for the first time ever, is actually achievable for some people, thanks to some pretty wild new tech.
Okay, so how are people actually chasing this new standard? Well, it's happening on two different tracks at the same time, and they're starting to merge in some really interesting, maybe even a little alarming ways. You've got the physical path on one hand, let's call it the Ozempic Dream, and on the other, the digital path, filtered realities. Two different roads, but they're both heading to the exact same destination. All right, so the Ozempic Dream. This is the physical route. It's all about using these powerful new drugs as a kind of shortcut, a chemical workaround to get those dramatic physical changes that match up with this synthetic ideal. It's basically trying to leapfrog over all the usual stuff like diet, exercise, even your own genetics. And then, at the very same time, you've got filtered realities. This is the instant fix, with just one tap, AI can give you perfect skin, reshape your face, boom. You have a perfect digital version of yourself. But here's the catch. It can lead to something called filter dysmorphia, where you start looking in the actual mirror and your real face just feels wrong in comparison. Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. These two paths, the physical and the digital, they aren't just running parallel. Nope. They're actually feeding into each other, creating this powerful, self-reinforcing cycle that just keeps cranking up the pressure to be perfect. Think of it like a four-stroke engine, constantly running. First, the algorithms push this super specific ideal look. That makes us want to look more like our filtered, perfect digital twin. Which, of course, opens up a huge market for companies to sell us solutions. And guess what? All the data from us clicking and buying just feeds right back into the algorithm, reinforcing the ideal and starting the whole thing over again. It's a perfect loop. So let's break that down, starting with the algorithm. You see, these systems are often trained on images that are already popular, which means they learn to promote a very specific, often westernized look. Then, they blast that content into our feeds because, hey, it gets clicks and engagement. It's a cycle that just keeps reinforcing one very narrow idea of beauty. And that brings us to the market's role. And wow, is it a big one. Just look at this number. The weight loss drug market is on track to hit a staggering $100 billion by 2030. That's a massive industry literally being built on top of these insecurities that the digital world helps create. And this loop is getting so good, it's becoming invisible. A lot of our phones and apps now automatically enhance our pictures by default. We're living in this pre-edited reality, The line between what's real and what's fake is being blurred before we even get a chance to notice. So, what's the big deal? What are the actual consequences of this constant loop? Well, the stakes are incredibly high. This isn't just about selfies anymore. We're talking about a real impact on our culture, our mental health, and even our physical well-being. Yeah, this relentless chase for perfection, it has a pretty steep price tag. We can basically break it down into three big areas. It's chipping away at our sense of authenticity. It's creating some serious health and fairness issues. And it's locking in a very narrow, biased standard of beauty. And when you look at the real-world impact, it's pretty sobering. On the health side, the demand for these drugs for cosmetic reasons is causing actual shortages for people with diabetes. And the high cost, it's creating what you could call an aesthetic divide between the rich and everyone else. At the same time, our idea of authenticity takes a hit. The value of being unique or imperfect just goes down. And culturally, the bias baked into the AI is constantly whispering this harmful message. If you don't fit the mold, something's wrong with you. So with all these high costs, what do we do? Is there a way to break this cycle? Well, the source material does lay out a path forward. And it's all centered on responsibility, transparency, and just a more thoughtful way of thinking about aesthetics. And here's the key. This can't be a one-sided fix. It has to be a collective effort. As you can see here, the responsibility has to be shared. It falls on the tech companies building the tools, on our schools and educators, and on the medical community too. So for the tech companies, what does that look like? It means getting serious about transparency. We're talking about simple but powerful things, like telling users when a filter is active, maybe even offering a real versus enhanced toggle switch. And most importantly, they need to diversify the data they use to train their AI, so it starts to celebrate human variety instead of trying to erase it. Then there's education, which is another huge piece of the puzzle. The goal here has to be digital literacy. We need to teach people, especially young people, to think critically about the perfect images they see everywhere online, to help them value long-term sustainable health over chasing some synthetic AI perfect body. And all of this really leads to the core message from the source. It's a powerful idea. In a world that is just flooded with fakes and filters, being your authentic self isn't a weakness, it's your superpower. Authenticity actually becomes your biggest advantage. And that really leaves us with one final question to think about. As these lines between physical and digital, real and fake, just keep getting blurrier, what does being real actually mean to you?